Welcome back, seekers of truth. Until now, we have walked in the golden light of reason with Ibn Rushd, speaking of virtue and hope. But truth is whole, and balance requires us to look into the shadows as well. Now, it is time to descend into the dark corridors of the human mind. Disturbing urges, repressed secrets, and the dangerous world of Sigmund Freud. To walk through this door requires courage. If you are ready to face your own darkness, we begin. If you are tired of drowning in the shallow waters of the internet, dive into the depths of thought with us. The unexamined life is not worth living. Join us to nourish your mind in the light of philosophy and science. Subscribe now.
To understand the shadows we must eventually face, we must first define the light. Our journey begins not in the modern era, but in the 12th century. In Al-Andalus, Cordoba, a magnificent beacon of knowledge during a time when much of the world slept in intellectual darkness. Here lived Abu al-Walid Muhammad ibn Ahmad ibn Rushd, known to the West simply as Averroes. He was the Grand Judge of Seville, a physician to caliphs, but above all, the great commentator who resurrected the logic of Aristotle for a forgotten world. In an age dominated by rigid dogma, Ibn Rushd dared to propose a radical harmony. He argued that faith and reason were not enemies. They were two distinct paths leading to the exact same truth. To him, using one's God-given intellect to understand the universe was not heresy, it was the highest form of worship. Proof does not contradict truth, he declared. But his most revolutionary ideas were perhaps about humanity itself. At a time when societies viewed women merely as passive instruments for procreation, Averroes raised his voice in dissent. He famously argued that intellect has no gender. He rejected the idea that women were like plants, existing only to bear fruit. He asserted that a society which keeps its women passive is a paralyzed society, using only half its strength. He envisioned a virtuous city where women could be philosophers, rulers, and warriors alongside men. He was the apex of rational optimism, a belief that human beings, through reason and virtue, could build a civilization of light. Yet, history tells a familiar story. The light often blinds those who prefer the dark. His books were burned by fanatics. He was sent into exile. He died lonely, thinking his mission had failed. Yet, history tells a familiar story. The light often blinds those who prefer the dark. His books were burned by fanatics. He was sent into exile. He died lonely, thinking his mission had failed. He did not know that the sparks from his burning books would drift across the sea, igniting the European Renaissance centuries later. He was the champion of the conscious mind. But what happens when we realize that the conscious mind is not the master in its own house? What happens when a different kind of thinker arrives, centuries later, to tell us that the light is an illusion, and the truth lies in the basement? But while Averroes was looking at the sun, wishing for a virtuous city, centuries later, another thinker lit a candle in the basement. He did not look up. He looked down, into the terrifying abyss of the human mind. Sigmund Freud. Freud shattered the arrogance of the conscious mind. He declared that we are not the masters of our own house. He famously compared the human mind to an iceberg. The small tip above the water is what we call consciousness, our logic, our decisions, our daily thoughts. But beneath the surface, a massive, dark mountain of ice hidden in the deep water. This is the unconscious, a reservoir of repressed memories, forbidden desires, and primal fears that secretly control our every move. He went further. He stripped away the comforting illusion of innocence. Society tells us that childhood is a time of purity. Freud disagreed. He argued that from the very moment we are born, we are driven by a relentless, primal hunger for pleasure. He claimed that the human being is, by nature, a creature of desire, selfish and raw, waiting to be tamed by the chains of civilization. Then, he introduced his most forbidden theory, the Oedipus complex, a tragedy buried in the family structure. He suggested that deep in the unconscious of every son lies a dark secret, a primal jealousy of the father and a possessive desire for the mother. A timeless struggle for power and love that shapes who we become, often without us ever realizing it. It is a theory that still makes the world tremble with discomfort. But what keeps these dark beasts in cages? Freud's answer was grim: civilization. He argued that civilization is not a gift, but a trade-off. We trade our happiness and our freedom for security. To live together, we must repress our true nature. We must bury our instincts. And because we bury them, we become neurotic. We become sick. According to Freud, the price of being civilized is misery. Finally, after witnessing the horrors of World War I, Freud looked at the endless violence of humanity and concluded that pleasure was not our only master. He discovered, thanatos, the death drive. An inherent, self-destructive urge within all of us. A whisper in the psyche that seeks chaos, aggression, and ultimately, a return to the silence of non-existence. We are not just builders, we are destroyers. So, here lies the great conflict of our existence. On one side, the scholar of Cordoba, Ibn Rushd. He offers us the light. He tells us that with reason and virtue, we can transcend our limits. He believes in the human potential to build a paradise on earth. On the other side, the doctor of Vienna, Sigmund Freud. He points to the darkness. He warns us that we are animals in suits, forever wrestling with the monsters in our basement. He believes we are tragic figures, doomed to repress who we really are. Light or darkness, hope or reality, the conscious will or the unconscious fate. Perhaps the truth is not in choosing one, but in understanding both. We must strive for the light of Averroes, while never forgetting the shadow of Freud.